So yeah, so I actually found Axie as a community member. It was a very, very small project. They had raised 60 ETH so far. The mint had been going on for a month, and it was only like 500 Axies had been minted out of 4,000. So these days, right, it's like, oh, if a NFT project doesn't mint out in one day, it's a failure, right? Oh, people get refunded or whatever.
Jiho, I'm super excited to have you over here with us. And kind of before we dive into the Sky Mavis and Ronin and Axie and all of this amazing journey that you're going through, can you share a bit more of your personal journey into Web3 and what kind of drew you in?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jeff, also known as Jiho. So Jiho is my Korean name. And yeah, I grew up as a gamer and a collector. So that's really my background, where I grew up playing Nintendo games and Blizzard games. So the first thing I ever did on the internet was play StarCraft. So I think from an early age, right, I could see that games were a good way to introduce people to new technologies. And I also grew up collecting things. So my dad collects insects and fossils. And the way that I would relate to my dad as a child would be to bring him like find a rare beetle or catch a rare butterfly. And right, so these were the ways that I was basically relating to my father. So gaming and collecting really defined my childhood and kind of how I grew up. But I didn't know that that's actually what I would do for a living. And I went to college. I studied military and economic history, so I was like a history major. And but it was, and so I had found out about crypto in like 2012 and 2013, and I thought that it would go up, but I also didn't. I wasn't really interested in taking the dive. One of the issues was I felt like it was unfair that I couldn't figure out how to mine Bitcoin. So I thought that it was unfair that I would have to buy Bitcoin from someone else. I was like, I wouldn't, it seemed kind of like an unfair market to me at that time. But, eventually a lot of my smartest friends got into Ethereum, and that's basically how I started tracking Ethereum. And then one day I saw CryptoKitties. And so I jumped into CryptoKitties. I became a breeder. I became like the first streamer. So I was kind of making guides for people. I was streaming CryptoKitties. I was teaching people how to breed. And I noticed that whenever I was talking about certain cats, you could see the market move, right? And people would be buying them. So I was like, wow, like there's something to this. Maybe I have some kind of talent here, and maybe this is an interesting industry. And so, yeah, I actually found Axie as a community member. It was a very, very small project. They had raised 60 ETH so far. The mint had been going on for a month, and it was only like 500 Axies had been minted out of 4,000. So these days, right, it's like, oh, if a NFT project doesn't mint out in one day, it's a failure, right? Oh, people get refunded or whatever. But that back in the day, that wasn't necessarily the case. Axie was also like the first bonding curve sale, I believe. So it was kind of like Hashmax, where the price started really low and increased with each subsequent buy. That also meant that it was harder, right, to kind of drive volume as the sale went on. So I joined, and I was like, I think you guys need someone to help with growth, and I think I can do that. So I convinced the team to kind of take a chance on me, and I just joined as like a community manager. And that's kind of really how the story began. So yeah, obviously it's been a crazy journey. That was over 7 years ago. And so we've been working on Axie and now Ronin for, basically about 7 years now. It's been a crazy journey. We actually onboarded millions of people. I think a lot of crypto companies have that on their website, but it's something that we actually did. Obviously we also gone through some really hard times and some crazy moments. And so yeah, I guess that's me.
That's a crazy journey into where you're at today. And I remember when we spoke, you told me about the scale of Axie, of Sky Mavis in general. which I think the number over there was 240 people. I'm not sure if I'm kind of pinning this correctly, but I think definitely one of the most successful companies in crypto, both in terms of kind of vision and the unique play and how you're building. And with you kind of joining as a community manager like 7 to 8 years ago at a very early time and growing into what it is today, can you share what it's been like and how do you kind of keep the early Axie energy within the team as it scales?
It's hard, right? You have to kind of purposely communicate that we need to be innovative and that we need to take risks. And you have to, in some ways, right, you need to create a culture of innovation and experimentation, but also create systems that basically facilitate that, right? Because some people will feel shy, or they may not feel empowered, or they may feel shy to kind of produce an idea or put forth an idea, right? So you have to be very like conscientious about how you're doing that. It's not easy. I don't think it's necessarily a solved problem of basically maintaining that kind of like startup mentality as you grow. And so I think it's about finding the right talent, creating the right systems internally, but also just like thinking about it and prioritizing it and communicating it, and making sure that you're working on those systems. But it's quite difficult for sure. But I think something that helps is like talking people through the stories of how we came up with certain ideas that were seen as innovative in retrospect, right? So it's like, why did we come up with the idea of SLP or coming up with the token, right? It was like, one was tokens were seen as nobody wanted a token. So for us, when basically we're like we thought that the power of crypto was around tokenization. So for us, it didn't make sense from first principles on why people were like afraid of tokens, right? So we're like, okay, let's start looking at how we could basically create a token for Axie. This was in 2018, right? So we basically started planning out this idea of like combining a token with Axie in 2018. And also, one of the things that we see is that like user feedback may not always be correct, but always pay attention to user buying behavior or user like feedback around, I want to buy this, right? So the idea for SLP actually came from, we actually used to have Axie off-chain experience points where people needed experience points to breed. But these were off-chain. People said, I'll put these on-chain, I want to buy them. Right? And we kept getting this feedback, right? So we're like, okay, what if these experience points could be tokenized? And really, right, so actually SLP was just tokenized Axie experience, where we wanted to create this kind of proof of play or proof of work system where in order to actually increase the Axie supply through breeding, you had to basically play and win a certain amount. So yeah, usually, right, like innovation doesn't come out of left field. It's usually like taking some idea and bringing it into a new context.
That's amazing, and I think with what you described earlier about proof of play, or kind of how do I know that someone is playing, to kind of compensate for that. I think what kind of really stamped out, and everybody here surely remember, it's the play to earn model, which at the time I remember hearing about. That was always the question of whether like that's a new kind of speculative thing that everybody should be kind of excited about right now and forget about in the future. But what kind of really made a lot of sense to me is when you and I chatted about Ronin's kind of early success coming from the idea that gamers could trade their time for real world value. And you're still a huge believer in that if there exists an arbitrage in which the time that you're spending is benefiting you with real world value, that's actually a successful gaming model, even if people kind of a bit forgot about play to earn more broadly. Can you share how you're viewing this model today, how you're seeing that evolving in the future?
Gamers create a ton of value by playing these games at a high level, by making content, and by giving feedback. Certain games, especially like, for example, Axie Classic, they get more fun the more people are playing, right? So these types of games where it's like, in order to kind of, incentives are a good way to basically solve the cold start problem, right? It's not like, and paying users, especially in the early parts of early days of a product. This isn't like a Web3 concept. Uber did this, Venmo did this, right? Typically, network-based products use incentives to kickstart the growth flywheel. So that's basically how we're thinking about it, is like, yo, Axie gets fun. It gets more fun the more people are playing. Therefore, right, there's like, it makes sense to think about using incentives. I still think that that is valid, and I still see, right, like, games as networks. I believe that teams are getting better at distributing these incentives and making sure that, right, that it's Sybil resistant, and teams are now building reputation systems to better target users, right? So that's just actually optimization of incentives, and people are getting, and teams are getting much better, especially like teams building on Ronin, teams like Pixels, Fishing Frenzy, Cambria. These teams are really innovating when it comes to how to target users with incentives and incentivize the right behaviors, right? With Axie Classic, right, obviously it was a pretty simple model, and there were some, there were some kind of holes in the model, just because it was such an early primitive product where, we didn't really know that it would go. We thought that, to be honest, we would have to keep building for a few more years before we would get our first million users, whereas in reality we went from, I think 50,000 users to 1 million users in maybe 1 month, right? And we made $1 billion in 3 months that summer. So, oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely one very crazy journey. And when thinking of this growth, I mean, I definitely agree with you that Web3 didn't invent the incentivization of users. I mean, the most famous story that comes to mind is like the 1999 bubble with PayPal kind of about to crash, and Elon Musk and kind of Peter Thiel are speaking about how to burn the money to get more users to survive. I think what we're seeing a lot of Web3 is that people are kind of using these tokens to what you previously coined as manufactured demand, where they're kind of using that to actually pay users to actually seem like there's activity when there's really nothing behind that. Can you share with this kind of thought of manufactured demand, what's working for Ronin today in terms of real token utility? Any examples that you're kind of really excited about?
Yeah, I mean, right now, if you look at which tokens are performing well, it's tokens that are able to have buybacks, and buybacks are typically a function of, are you able to generate revenue? So then the question becomes, what revenue models are working for Web3 games? Because then you're able to forecast which gaming tokens, right, might have a consistent source of future buybacks as the tokens kind of get flushed out. And so some metas that we're seeing is this idea of like risk to earn. So Cambria is a really good example. Cambria is kind of like old school RuneScape, but basically they have this system called Gold Rush, where, right, the servers will be open for 3 weeks. People will basically progress, and there will be kind of like these trinkets and certain special items that, as you gather those items, you get more points. And then basically at the end of the season, the prize pool, so you actually need to pay to join, right? The prize pool will get divided up and sent to players depending on basically how well they did during the season, right? So this meta of like risk to earn, and I think it's like social coordination, guilds, war. I think these are some of the things that are basically working, and that does make sense, right? Where, what's the closest to a Web3 gaming economy that we have in traditional gaming, I guess, is EVE Online, right? So EVE Online has around 30,000 players. They make $60 million a year. And what is sustaining the economy is basically this idea of like players joining guilds, players, the guilds needing to fight each other in different wars. And so, yeah, so I also see, right, that as a model that will be kind of replicated more and more in Web3 gaming.
So building some more on top of that. So I think one of the things that is coolest about Web3 gaming is how it continues to innovate and kind of try new revenue model. I think you've touched in the past about Craftworld's kind of approach to in-game ads, which is another kind of interesting kind of monetization strategy. Some of these strategies are kind of proven to be I would say perhaps timely, exciting at times, but not kind of being very sustainable, not being as marginal as some others. What do you see of all of these methods that were kind of tried over based on what you're seeing from the Ronin perspective to be a sustainable revenue model, which I think if we're looking at kind of Web2 mobile gaming and others, they've tried a few things, but it's pretty much games are making waves in probably the same, I don't know, handful ways. What do you see these kind of ways being in Web3 gaming as it evolves?
It's really difficult because people throw this idea of sustainable revenue models around a lot, whereas like most games, right, basically have a lot of revenue at the beginning and then it kind of slow down and trickle down. So that's actually why like, it's really important to think about what type of genre of game actually makes sense for Web3 gaming. One second. And what type of game makes sense for Web3 gaming? And it may be that not all genres, right? Hyper casual games might not necessarily make sense for a Web3 game where it's like you have a token and there needs to be like, right, some constant stream of revenue. So I think the genre of game makes a lot of is very important. That's why we're seeing, right, some minimum viable MMOs, because these MMOs are games that are designed to last for a really long time. There is, right, this idea of like social coordination and warfare that can drive, right, demand for that can drive the player-driven economy. And yeah, so I that's what that's what we're seeing in the market is like a lot of teams that are looking at, right, how do we basically use in-game reputation to reward the players that are actually spending and contributing value to the ecosystem? How do we basically encourage more kind of like PvP and for whales to be encouraged to spend more and more to kind of like flex and basically create these guild systems. So I think like guild systems are coming back, right? Where Axie got really big via guilds, and I think teams are iterating on basically the guild model where you have whales that are paying on behalf of others to play, right? So it's like people need to pay to play, but if you cannot afford to play, someone can pay on your behalf and kind of, right, get some percentage of your winnings if you win. But also, right, it's like not guaranteed that you're going to win in a lot of these models, right? And that's kind of also where some of the sustainability is coming in.
And specifically as someone kind of really focused on ads in crypto, I mean, a lot of the perspective that I'm seeing is so many projects in crypto are suffering from bad user acquisition, a lot because people that are owning crypto are anonymous, they're hiding in plain sight, and people are not sure where to get them. But a lot of them are actually streamlined through the Web3 games. I'd love to get a bit more of your ideas for kind of do ads play a role in monetization for Web3 gaming? And if so, does it look the same like it is with Web2 gaming? Or is it perhaps different with the added advantage of kind of streamlining crypto users to other places?
It's still the jury's still out. Craft World, as you mentioned, right? Craft World, Angry Dynamites. They're doing something really interesting here where it's a way to get some monetization from your free to play users, right? So I believe it's promising. It's still very early. I believe that teams, if they want to explore this more, you should talk to Ali and the Voya and the Craft World team. Voya Games is actually their game studio, and I believe that they're farther than others. And for them, it's seems to be pretty easy, and it's like an additional revenue stream that is not insignificant, right? So Web3 gaming and crypto gaming is great at generating attention. Therefore, right, some sort of ad monetization model makes sense from when you look at it.
When we bonded on top of kind of the cost per wallet article and kind of looking at ads and the cost of users, I think touched something over there that we share a bit about looking at revenue models and then users through the lens of numbers, right? Does it make sense? Is it sustainable? Is it growing? Can you share your broader take on, or maybe I'll take a step back from that. There are some voices on crypto Twitter that are kind of laughing about revenue being a meta in this space, with which I can share my take on that, but based on the laugh, you can understand what I'm thinking about that. But when talking about certainly the ability to look into revenue with numbers, where Web3 can go on that, can you share what's your kind of broader take on how this industry, perhaps Web3 gaming, perhaps broader than that, is looking into revenues, looking into growth? If it's using numbers, what is lacking over there? Kind of your general thoughts about that.
So when I read that report on cost per wallet, that was very interesting to me. One, because I saw that the cost per wallet was cyclical depending on market sentiment, which kind of confirmed something that I basically had lived, which is sometimes it's really easy to get users and sometimes it's really hard. And you have to be cognizant of whether you're living in a moment where it's easy to get users or hard to get users. And so that's a big part of the difference between Web3 and Web2. And Web2, right, it's a little bit more, right? Seasonal factors are less important. Web3 is more like a seasonal business where it's like during the bull market, it's kind of like the holiday season, right? It's like there's a land grab and you have to make sure that you're positioned for that. And then there are bear markets where it's like, okay, if it's really hard and expensive to acquire users right now, where am I investing my resources and my time, my energy, and directing my team to do that as well?
Perfect.
Yeah,
Taking a bit of
and then in terms of like, the revenue, I mean, people are understanding that, hey, especially I think revenue was kind of laughed at when there was a lack of regulatory clarity, because basically when there was a lack of regulatory clarity around tokens, right, teams would basically release a token, but they would also be getting a lot of revenue. And it would be difficult for them to basically use that revenue for buybacks. So to me, the purpose of, right, what I'm starting to see is that the purpose of revenue is to fuel buybacks. If you basically link those two together, then users and the outside world like revenue. It's just that there was no clear value accrual mechanism between, right, tokens and revenue when basically that could be seen as like a really risky move from a regulatory perspective in the past.
And jumping more into the regulatory perspective. So you called attending the Trump Crypto Gala as representing our digital nation. Can you share a bit more about that night? What stood out to you, and how do you think political involvement is kind of shaping crypto's next chapter?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so I was invited to that dinner. I didn't know. Some people have been like, "Oh, why are you like holding so much of the Trump meme coin?" Is like, No, I was invited. Why? I think because I've actually, been a Trump supporter since 2016. I was very early, and I bought him when he was at 5 cents, and that's actually how I got some of my initial funding to be able to become an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur is expensive, right? You need to have some runway, because in the early days of being an entrepreneur, you basically will lose money or spend money, and it can be quite expensive. And so yeah, it's clear that crypto is at a crossroads. It's clear that the administration they're controversial and they're not perfect, but they are pushing to make America the crypto capital of the world. And so far, right, the actions indicate that that isn't just lip service, and it's actually a priority. So I believe it's been great, and we are seeing, right, like a bit of a crypto boom right now. And especially around like regulatory clarity. It used to be that founders were afraid. Founders were afraid to do buybacks. Founders were afraid to release tokens. That fear is dissipating.
100%. When I'm thinking about the long-term vision for Ronin, for Web3 gaming, how do you see it? Do you see Ronin kind of becoming the Nintendo of Web3 with flagship games, or something perhaps more open, like an operating system? What do you see the future like for Web3 gaming and for Ronin?
Gamification is eating the world. And Ronin is perfectly positioned to be the gamification center for crypto. And so, yes, Ronin, in some ways, can be seen as like a crypto Nintendo, a crypto Steam, but also we're very well positioned to post things on the chain that are also gamified DeFi, all sorts of gamified apps, and theoretically could do quite well on Ronin. So that's one of the things that we're thinking a lot about recently, is like we have this core foundation with gaming that's always going to be a huge part of our identity, but how do we also expand the pie of what's possible on Ronin?
Two last questions for me, and then perhaps we'll open up for Q&A. I'm sure a lot of people over here have questions. You've said on crypto Twitter that you feel like 2025 feels like a turning point, where people are kind of searching for meaning again after like the meme coin phase, and it definitely feels very, very different. What's the most exciting thing you see being built in Web3 gaming right now?
It can be, so we as people who are looking at crypto gaming every day, we can be a little bit too close to the sausage and get frustrated with get frustrated with the progress. But I'm also especially recently, talking to people who haven't thought about crypto gaming since 2021. And they come back and they're like, wow, like this space has evolved a lot. Back then it was only Axie. Now, right, there's games like Fableborn, Fishing Frenzy, Cambria, and Moku, Grand Arena is looking crazy, right? So basically, although there are a lot of like failed projects and there are a lot of bad projects, there is a handful of teams that are really doing exciting things, and right, it's like, let's say 5 to 7 teams, and that's a lot more than there was in 2021, which is basically the last time that most of the world thought about or cared about crypto gaming. But people are coming to check back in. Why? Because Bitcoin went up a ton. ETH is now, right, looking like it's set to make new all-time highs. NFTs are starting to percolate, right? Our crypto punks are starting to appreciate. Therefore, right, like institutional capital, like the whales, are kind of thinking, yo, like ETH is going up. NFTs are starting to go up. Gaming was the thing that actually had the highest returns last cycle. and happened at the end of the cycle, right? Late in the cycle. So it's like, okay, if you're thinking that we're starting to progress in the cycle, gaming is a thing to look at. So that's what I'm seeing from, right, like Wall Street basically, or these like more like kind of traditional money managers, and right, they basically traded AXS on kind of at an individual level last cycle, but now, right, this is like the institutional cycle, right? So I also believe that Wall Street is getting more interested in Web3 gaming, and I believe that kind of sort of capital injection could basically create the flywheel or ignite the spark, just like we had last cycle. Because, right, a huge capital injections into Web3 gaming, right, basically can create this virtuous loop. And that's one of the really powerful aspects of crypto gaming, is that you have like these flywheels where, okay, if the tokens start going up, more people start playing the games, more people start spending in the games, all the data is looking really good, the communities start to get really, really excited, and that basically creates all this like energy and attention that can create these really special moments.
Definitely agree. I also think about that as like another level to kind of token validation, which typically a project goes on a TGE, people start trading that, but they need to prove themselves. And currently, like the highest floor of social validation is being listed on an exchange, right? If Binance accepts you, Coinbase accept you, this shows the trust. But getting to a level in which Wall Street are deciding to invest in your token.
Yeah. The problem with Web3 gaming is that, right, like Web3 gaming tokens getting listed on Binance and Coinbase hasn't made them go up this cycle, right? So it's like clearly right there, you need some bigger source of capital infusions to kind of get the flywheel working, right? So that's one of the things that we're kind of looking at and working on behind the scenes.
Amazing. And one last question on my end. What's something you wish more people understood about the work you're doing?
I believe that we have a very special lineup of experiences on Ronin that are playable right now. And so if anyone's interested, right, go to wallet.roninchain.com, check out the Ronin wallet, check out the discovery. I do think that both Ronin, Axie, crypto gaming, these are things that you kind of have to use to understand and to experience those magic moments. So yeah, I wish that there was a, and this is also related to like a lot of the discussions that we've had, Asaf, where I wish that there was just like a way to programmatically and systematically onboard people en masse to our products. Jose is saying, which game should we try first? I would definitely check out I would check out Pixels. So if you haven't played Pixels yet, right, they built really interesting stuff. Keep an eye on Fableborn, Cambria, and Fishing Frenzy. Fishing Frenzy is like nice and casual and fun, and the team is really transparent. They have like also like their own in-house creator program that's really great. So yeah, those are some recommendations.
Amazing. So I
Angry Dynamites. Sorry, Asaf was talking about
yeah.
Craft World, right? Angry Dynamites or Craft World, and Axie Origins just had Axie continues to ship, so we just started a new season there. The top 2,000. There's I believe the prize pool is around $160,000 split among the top 2,000. So Axie is still giving out crazy rewards, and yeah.
I love the Angry Dynamites team. Every time I meet Oli, it's amazing to me how sometimes people are thinking about kind of Web3 gaming is somewhat like another landscape, but then you kind of learn about the backgrounds of the people, where they're coming from, people selling previous companies to Ubisoft. You understand kind of the level of potential. I learned a lot from this. this has been amazing, Jiho. And I want to leave the floor open for kind of maybe kind of two questions from the audience. If anybody kind of want to jump in. Yeah, go ahead, Jose.
Sorry, I know I already asked one in the chat. In terms of like for you, Jiho, in terms of DeFi, what would you like to see on Ronin
Mm.
to
I
support
want to see more game.
all
I
these
actually,
games, experiences? Yeah.
I believe that what's missing with Ronin DeFi is actually a gamification layer on top of it. So that I believe that that's actually where we can really thrive. And you're actually seeing this with Angry Dynamite. So go check out the tweet that Ali just put out. They actually have done 1 million transactions already, I think in just a couple of days, and they've generated over $70,000 in gas fees for the chain, or because they have like a DEX integrated directly into their game, right? So I think these like this gamification, right, like integrating DeFi directly into these apps and having it kind of abstracted in the background, like I think that's really powerful. And then also like some sort of a gamification layer for using DeFi on Ronin, whether that's like basically, right? So as I said, gamification is eating the world, and Ronin is perfectly positioned to benefit from that. Why? Because it's like, oh, right, like gamers love rituals, they love routines, they respond really well to incentives for like basically certain actions. So, what if there was, right, a universal kind of questing layer, right, for Ronin, where it's like you play these games, use these DeFi protocols, right, you earn points or reputation, and then, right, it's like as you progress, as you have your reputation progress, right, that basically adds more data, right, to your profile, which then allows, right, game developers and stuff like that to target you via the social graph, right? So the key, right, is like Ronin is actually one of the key things that Ronin has is a social graph of gamers that developers can now come in and target. There's a lot of problems with targeting of gamers and in Web2, right? There's like IDFA, right? It's like very, very difficult to actually do user acquisition. Theoretically, this isn't the case yet, but theoretically, right, like if you can create a very data rich social graph of gamers via reputation systems and data enrichment of just certain profiles, right, that becomes this tool that is really, really helpful for developers. And right, it's like in Web3, you own your data, and people, right, it's like rather than people necessarily putting all their money into like ads, right, it's like you can do these rewards where you basically target users via rewards and incentives based on who they are.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, who they are and their actual on-chain spending.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is like even beyond, I guess, Web2 targeted ads.
And right, it's like, that users like that, right? Because there's benefits that they get from, right, basically the sharing that data. Plus, right, their Web3 identity is obfuscated or not necessarily connected to their meat space identity, right?
Perhaps one last question from the audience.
Yeah, I can go then. If no one is in. So, Joe, as you might know, we looked at the on-chain data of the Axie Infinity community, which we posted on X from the Addressable account. And I would say that the results were pretty surprising. We found that the number one topic, one of the most engaging topics that your audience had, isn't just gaming, but also trading market analysis. So does it surprise you that you have attracted such a financially focused community? And would that influence your roadmap somehow?
A lot of the people that, right, were onboarded into Axie and Ronin were people that had only been trading on Binance before. And then it was like, okay, Axie was the first thing that they ever did on chain. And so Axie was this moment where we had a mass migration of crypto traders into actually starting to use the blockchain, use a blockchain for the first time. And so that's not surprising. And it's definitely right. It's like for us, that's why like having a DEX on Ronin is so important, right? Where these gamers, Web3 gamers are right. It's traders, they're speculators. That's part of their persona. And yeah, teams that don't understand that and just think that they're normal gamers, right? They're gonna have a hard time.
Perfect. Not sure if there's any last questions, but we're getting to the end of time. Jiho, I want to say thank you so much. This was so insightful. And for everybody joining, thank you for joining. And I hope you found it teaching and insightful as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, man. Like really appreciate your research and all you're doing for the space. And let's continue to jam. So.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, that was fun.
Thanks for putting it together, man. Yeah, Leah, I want to connect you to our wallet, to my maybe my product marketing manager on the wallet side, and see if there's something that we can team up on.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I forgot you're based in SF. I'm actually in New York next week. I'm not sure where is it. Are some of the
we're just opening up this office now. Yeah.
Wonderful. Perfect. Yeah, I'd love to be in touch about Ronin wallets and yeah, things that are coming out in the future. I actually want to show you a bit of things about learning who's behind crypto users and kind of get your kind of thoughts about that. We can do it. We can do it definitely some other time.
Yeah, let's schedule like a catch up. I need to go, but yeah, man, thanks so much for having me. This was awesome.
Thank you so much. Bye.